The history we were taught is a flattened version of the past. It is orderly, coherent, and designed not to disturb modern understanding. But that version is incomplete. In many cases, it is simply wrong. Mainstream science, academic institutions, and textbook models have long chosen to soften or sideline data that does not fit established frameworks. Not because the evidence is absent, but because it is inconvenient. Anomalies are labeled exceptions, unresolved, and quietly pushed to the margins, reduced to footnotes rather than confrontations. Cities appear with levels of precision that do not belong to their supposed age. Machines of extraordinary complexity surface in periods where calculation itself was believed to be impossible. Written accounts once dismissed as fantasy align with physical remains buried in stone, soil, and seabeds. Structures are destroyed, submerged, erased from view, yet never truly gone. If these stories were not metaphors, not symbolic myths, but distorted memories of real events, then why were they classified as legends in the first place? And why does the evidence continue to emerge, slowly, persistently, exactly where the myths said it would? Perhaps the most unsettling realization is not that legends turned out to be true, but that the truth suggests humanity once occupied a position it no longer wishes to acknowledge. Dawn breaks over the plain of Hizarlik without romance. No heroic silhouettes, no wooden horse, only dry wind moving across brown earth, and layers of stone stacked like wounds that never healed. Here, history does not speak in verses. It speaks in strata. For centuries, Troy existed only as poetry. Homer's Iliad was treated as literature, not evidence. Scholars agree that the Trojan War, if it ever occurred, was symbolic, a cultural allegory inflated by imagination, a story meant to endure, not to be true. But soil does not preserve metaphors. In the late 19th century, excavations at Hizarlik revealed something literature could not explain away. Not a single city, but many, layer upon layer of settlement, each built atop the ruins of the last. 9 major archaeological strata, several showing unmistakable signs of violent destruction. Collapsed walls, embedded spearheads, burned debris, human remains. One layer in particular, dated to the 13th century BCE, stands apart. Massive defensive walls, narrow gates designed for siege conditions, evidence of fire and sudden collapse. Its timeline aligns uncomfortably well with the period traditionally assigned to the Trojan War. The anomaly lies not in the existence of ruins, but in their precision. The location matches the epic. The scale contradicts the idea of a minor settlement. Troy was not a village. It was a fortified city controlling a strategic corridor between the Aegean Sea and the Black Sea, a position valuable enough to justify prolonged conflict. Mainstream interpretation remains cautious. Troy, historians argue, was simply one city among many in the late Bronze Age. Any conflict there was likely economic or regional, stripped of heroic drama. The Iliad is framed as exaggeration, myth layered onto a modest historical kernel. This explanation is tidy and incomplete. If Troy was insignificant, why was it rebuilt again and again on the same site for over 1,000 years? Why do multiple destruction layers coincide with a broader regional collapse across the eastern Mediterranean? And why does a story presumed fictional preserve the correct geography, political relevance, and violent outcome of a city buried for 3 millennia? There is no evidence for Achilles, no trace of divine intervention, but there are walls, weapons, ash, a city that fell exactly as legend claimed, minus the poetry. The question is no longer whether Troy existed. That debate is over. The real question is how many other myths are still waiting beneath our feet, ready to force history to confront what it chose to forget. The light fades over the western coast of Anatolia. The sea is calm, indifferent. This shoreline has witnessed trade, migration, and violence long before it was given a name in verse. War here did not begin with heroes. It began with roots, ports, and control. In Orthodox history, the Trojan War remains surrounded by quotation marks. It is taught as literary tradition, not documented conflict. No contemporary Greek chronicles, no battlefield records. The Iliad is classified as cultural memory, shaped by oral transmission rather than factual reporting. Yet wars do not require poets to occur. They leave other kinds of evidence behind. At the end of the Late Bronze Age, around the 13th century BCE, the Eastern Mediterranean entered a period of systemic collapse. Major powers fell almost simultaneously. Mycenaean palaces burned. Hittite administration vanished. Coastal cities were destroyed and never rebuilt. Trade networks that had functioned for centuries disintegrated within decades. This was not local unrest. It was regional failure. Troy stood directly in the path of that failure. Its position controlled access between the Aegean Sea and the Black Sea, a choke point for tin, grain, and maritime movement. Any power-seeking dominance in the region would have to contend with whoever held Troy. This is not speculation. It is geography. Independent of Greek tradition, Hittite diplomatic texts record a city called Wilusa. Linguistically, Wilusa corresponds directly to Ilios, the alternative name for Troy. These records describe treaties, disputes, and military interventions involving Wilusa and Western powers known as the Ahiyawa, widely identified with the Mycenaean Greeks. Here, the boundary of acceptability is crossed. A major conflict is attested. The location matches. The political players align. The time frame converges. What is missing are the gods and the heroes, not the war itself. Mainstream scholarship offers a controlled explanation. The Trojan War, it argues, was not a single, dramatic event but a compression of multiple conflicts into one narrative. The Iliad is seen as a mythologized synthesis, an epic memory shaped over generations, not a historical account. But this explanation fractures under its own weight. If the war was merely symbolic, why does it preserve such accurate geopolitical logic? Why does an oral tradition retain the correct city, the correct strategic significance, and the correct external powers after centuries of retelling? And why did this particular conflict survive in collective memory, while countless others vanished without trace? The Iliad does not tell us how the war was fought, but it may be telling us that it happened. The unresolved question is not whether the Trojan War was real, but whether myth was ever meant to conceal it, or to preserve it in a form history would only recognize thousands of years later. The entrance is unremarkable. A low opening in the volcanic rock of Cappadocia, easily mistaken for a collapsed cellar or an abandoned storage pit. No markers, no warnings. Yet beneath this quiet ground lies a space that rewrites the scale of what ancient communities were capable of planning and fearing. Derinkuyu is not a cave. It is a city. Descending into it feels less like exploration and more like intrusion. Narrow shafts drop vertically. Stone doors, circular, weighing hundreds of kilograms, are positioned to seal entire levels from the inside. Corridors tighten, forcing the body to turn sideways. Light disappears quickly. This is not a place designed for comfort, or worship, or burial. It is designed to survive something. The confirmed depth exceeds 60 meters, at least 18 underground levels. Living quarters, kitchens, storage rooms, wine presses, stables, schools, chapels. A ventilation system so sophisticated that fresh air reaches the deepest chambers, even when the city is sealed. Water access that cannot be poisoned from the surface. Capacity estimates range from 20,000 to over 40,000 people, underground for extended periods. This is not an emergency shelter. This is infrastructure. The reality that cannot be dismissed is scale. Derinkuyu is only one of more than 200 known underground complexes in the region, many connected by tunnels stretching for kilometers. Some show evidence of multiple phases of expansion, spanning centuries. Whoever began this project understood geology, airflow, crowd management, and long-term isolation. Mainstream explanations proceed carefully. Initial construction is often attributed to the Phrygians around the 8th century BCE, with later expansions by Byzantine Christians seeking refuge from Arab raids. In this view, Derinkuyu is the cumulative result of repeated invasions, each generation digging deeper to escape the next threat. But this explanation breaks at a critical point. If Derinkuyu was built reactively, why does its deepest infrastructure appear among the earliest phases? Why are the ventilation shafts and defensive doors integrated into the core design, rather than added later? And why does the city extend far beyond what short-term refuge would require? This level of planning assumes anticipation, not improvisation. There is no historical record describing the original threat that justified such an undertaking. No chronicles of sieges lasting months underground. No documentation of a surface catastrophe that forced entire populations to vanish below the earth. The city exists, but the reason for its existence does not. The details push beyond acceptable margins. Livestock chambers deep underground imply long-term habitation. Schools suggest children growing up without sunlight. The psychological implications alone are extreme. This was not hiding for days. It was living below the surface as a deliberate strategy. Official archaeology stops short of interpretation. The city is presented as a defensive adaptation. An impressive one, but still rational, still explainable. Yet the unanswered question remains suspended in the dark. What kind of danger requires tens of thousands of people to engineer a hidden city beneath their own land? Not to flee permanently, but to return again and again, over generations. And why does no surface myth clearly describe the event that made such a city necessary? Derinkuyu does not contradict history. It ignores it. It stands as evidence of a fear so profound, so normalized, that it reshaped architecture, society, and daily life, without leaving behind a single explicit warning. And if one such city existed, deliberately hidden, the final question becomes unavoidable. What were they preparing for? Long before we ever thought to ask. The cave is silent. Limestone walls, dry air, no ceremony. No sense that anything of consequence should be here at all. And yet, sealed inside clay jars, hidden in darkness for nearly 2,000 years, lay texts that history was never meant to lose and never expected to recover. Before 1947, the Hebrew Bible was known only through copies made more than a millennium after its supposed composition. The oldest complete manuscripts dated to the Middle Ages. Everything earlier was reconstruction, inference, faith in transmission. Scholars assumed the text had evolved, altered, edited, corrected by generations of scribes. The originals, if they ever existed, were thought to be irretrievably gone. Then the caves near the Dead Sea were opened by accident. What emerged from Qumran were fragments and scrolls dating from the 3rd century BCE to the 1st century CE. Entire books of the Hebrew Bible, multiple copies of the same texts, commentaries, rules of an isolated community, apocalyptic, writings never included in any canon, all preserved in a climate so dry that ink survived where memory did not. The fact that cannot be denied is textual continuity. Large portions of these manuscripts match the modern Hebrew Bible with near-perfect accuracy, word for word, line for line, over a span of more than 1,000 years. This was not supposed to be possible. According to prevailing models, sacred texts were expected to drift, mutate, adapt to politics and doctrine. They did not. The threshold-breaking detail is not that religious texts existed early. It is that they were guarded with an obsessive precision that defies assumptions about ancient literacy and organization. The community at Qumran, likely the Essenes, was not merely copying scripture. They were preserving it against time, conflict, and internal corruption. Even more unsettling are the texts that did not survive into official tradition. Apocalyptic visions, messianic figures described in plural, wars between sons of light and sons of darkness. A worldview structured around imminent collapse and judgment. These were not fringe fantasies. They were central to how this community understood reality and history's direction. Mainstream scholarship offers a stabilizing interpretation. The Dead Sea Scrolls are framed as a snapshot of Jewish diversity during the Second Temple period, one sect among many. Their beliefs, intense but localized. Their textual fidelity explained by disciplined scribal practice. This explanation is academically sound and insufficient. If these texts were marginal, why preserve them so carefully? If this was merely one sect, why do their biblical manuscripts align so closely with the version that would later become dominant? And why do their excluded writings echo themes that later re-emerge, transformed but unmistakable, in early Christianity and apocalyptic movements? There is also the matter of intent. The scrolls were hidden deliberately, not discarded, not abandoned, sealed, catalogued, and placed where they could endure centuries of silence. This was not neglect. It was preservation under threat. Someone believed the knowledge inside mattered enough to risk losing it forever, rather than allowing it to be altered. History offers no clear account of the moment this decision was made. Roman advance, internal schism, anticipation of destruction. The reason is inferred, never recorded. The Dead Sea Scrolls do not reveal a new religion. They reveal something more disruptive, that what we call Scripture was once more unstable, more contested, and more dangerous than later tradition admits. That myth, prophecy, and history were once inseparable, and that some versions were intentionally removed from sight. The unresolved question is not whether these texts are authentic. That debate is settled. The question is why a body of writings powerful enough to shape belief for millennia had to be hidden in caves, waiting for a future that might finally be ready to read them. Morning mist drifts across the ridgeline of the Andes, slow and deliberate, as if the mountain itself is deciding what to reveal. Stone terraces emerge, then disappear again. Walls align with the slope at angles that feel intentional rather than obedient. Machu Picchu does not rise from the landscape. It is fused into it. There is no road leading to this city, no written record describing its construction, no mention of it in Spanish chronicles at the moment of conquest. When it was revealed to the outside world in 1911, it appeared intact, abandoned, but not destroyed, as if it had been sealed away rather than defeated. The indisputable reality is engineering. Machu Picchu sits nearly 2,500 meters above sea level, on a fault-riddled ridge between two peaks. The stones are cut with such precision that mortar is unnecessary. Blocks weighing several tons interlock so tightly that even modern blades cannot pass between them. The structures have withstood centuries of earthquakes, landslides, and relentless rainfall. This is not primitive masonry. It is seismic architecture. The city's drainage system alone forces a re-evaluation of Inca capability. Over 60% of the construction lies underground. Channels, foundations, filtration layers designed to control water in one of the wettest mountain environments on Earth. Without this invisible infrastructure, the site would have collapsed within decades. It has endured for centuries. Mainstream explanation remains cautious but firm. Machu Picchu is described as a royal estate or ceremonial center, constructed in the 15th century under the Inca Emperor Pachacuti. Its abandonment is attributed to the Spanish conquest and the spread of disease. The absence of written records is explained by the Inca reliance on oral tradition and quipu systems, rather than alphabetic writing. Yet this explanation fractures under scrutiny. If Machu Picchu was a royal retreat, why build it in a location so inaccessible that supplying it would be a logistical burden? Why invest extraordinary engineering resources into a city that appears to have housed a relatively small population? And why was it abandoned so completely that it vanished from collective memory within a generation? The anomaly deepens when compared to other Inca sites. Many were dismantled, repurposed, or built over by the Spanish. Machu Picchu was left untouched, not burned, not occupied, not even recorded. It was as if its existence had been deliberately removed from history's surface. The detail that crosses the threshold is survival. Machu Picchu should not still exist. A city of this complexity, perched on an unstable ridge, without ongoing maintenance, should have collapsed long ago. Instead, it remains, precisely because it was built to anticipate failure. Earthquakes were expected. Floods were assumed. The mountain was not an obstacle. It was a variable. Official archaeology praises Inca ingenuity while maintaining a firm, chronological boundary. No lost technology. No external influence. Everything explained within accepted cultural evolution. And yet the silence remains. No inscriptions naming its purpose. No records explaining why it was hidden. No accounts of its final evacuation. A city appears, functions briefly, and disappears, leaving behind architecture that modern engineering still studies for solutions. The unanswered question is not how Machu Picchu was built. It is why a civilization facing existential collapse invested its highest knowledge into a city it never intended the future to remember. The object is small, corroded, broken into fragments that fit in the palm of a hand. When it was lifted from the seabed near the Greek island of Antikythera in 1901, it looked like nothing more than a lump of mineralized bronze. No monument, no inscription meant to impress. And yet, it remains one of the most disruptive artifacts ever recovered from the ancient world. This is not a symbolic object. It is mechanical. X-ray imaging revealed a dense system of interlocking bronze gears, more than 30 of them, cut with precision that should not exist in the 1st century BCE. Teeth spaced evenly. Ratios calculated deliberately. When reconstructed, the mechanism is capable of predicting solar and lunar eclipses, tracking planetary cycles, and modeling complex astronomical motions with startling accuracy. The reality that cannot be dismissed is function. This device does not approximate the sky. It computes it. It encodes knowledge of celestial mechanics that would not reappear in Europe for more than 1,000 years. Differential gearing, long thought to be a medieval or early modern innovation, appears here, fully formed. This alone exceeds the accepted threshold. According to conventional history, ancient Greek technology relied on simple machines, levers, pulleys, water clocks. Complex gear trains were considered beyond their manufacturing capability. The Antikythera Mechanism violates this assumption completely. It is not experimental. It is not crude. It is the product of an established technical tradition. Mainstream explanation attempts containment. The mechanism is described as a singular anomaly, an isolated masterpiece created by an unknown genius, possibly linked to the intellectual circles of Archimedes or Rhodes. A technological dead end, built once, lost, never replicated. But this explanation collapses under minimal pressure. Complex machines are not invented in isolation. They require prior knowledge, skilled workshops, and a user base capable of understanding and maintaining them. No civilization develops precision gearing for a single device, then forgets it entirely. Technologies propagate, or they leave traces of a suppressed lineage. The detail that fractures the narrative is intention. The Antikythera mechanism was not decorative. It was not ritual. It was designed to be used, calibrated, and understood. It assumes its operator knows mathematics, astronomy, and mechanical principles. This implies education, transmission, and repetition, none of which appear in the historical record. Official scholarship accepts the object as real, remarkable, and unexplained, then stops. It places the mechanism inside a glass case, labels it an outlier, and moves on. The broader implications are left untouched. If such a machine existed, others likely did as well. Made of bronze, lost to corrosion, melted down, erased not by catastrophe, but by time and reuse. The unresolved question is not how advanced this single device was. It is why a civilization capable of building a mechanical model of the cosmos allowed that knowledge to vanish, leaving behind an artifact so precise that it forces us to confront the possibility that technological history is not a straight line, but a series of peaks we have chosen not to remember. The water off the western coast of India is deceptively calm. Tides move in slow cycles. Fishermen pass over it daily, unaware that beneath their boats lie walls, streets, and foundations arranged with deliberate order. The sea does not advertise what it has taken. It simply covers it. For centuries, Dwarka existed only in scripture. In Hindu tradition, it was the city of Krishna, a divine capital described in epic texts, rich beyond measure, engineered with impossible symmetry, then swallowed by the ocean after its abandonment. To historians, this was myth in its purest form, symbolic destruction, moral allegory, not geography, until stone appeared where no stone should be. Marine archaeology off the coast of modern Dwarka has revealed submerged structures extending far beyond natural formations. Rectilinear walls, anchors, paved surfaces, urban layouts, aligned with tidal patterns rather than random deposition. Some remains lie at depths that imply submergence thousands of years. Ago, consistent with post-glacial sea level rise. The undeniable reality is construction. These are not shipwrecks. They are not scattered debris. They are organized remains of human habitation. Large-scale, coastal, deliberately planned. The city was not washed away overnight. It was overtaken gradually, as water claimed land that had once been dry. The threshold-breaking detail lies in chronology. Certain datings suggest phases of occupation far earlier than conventional timelines for complex urbanism in the region. This does not require divine intervention, but it does require a reassessment of how early and how advanced coastal civilizations may have been before rising seas erased their surface record. Mainstream interpretation moves carefully. The structures are acknowledged, but often framed as ports, harbors, or later settlements reworked by myth. The epics, scholars argue, absorbed real locations and exaggerated them into sacred narrative. Dwarka becomes inspiration, not evidence. Yet, this explanation leaves fractures exposed. If the city was ordinary, why did myth preserve its precise fate? Why describe submergence rather than destruction by war or fire? And why do multiple submerged sites along the Indian coastline tell the same story? Of cities lost not to conquest, but to water. The detail that resists dismissal is pattern. Dwarka is not alone. It fits within a broader global phenomenon of drowned settlements, dating to the end of the last ice age, when sea levels rose over 100 meters. Entire coastlines disappeared. Any civilization that lived there would have been erased almost completely from the archaeological record, except where stone endured. Official history accepts sea level rise. It accepts coastal loss. But it rarely integrates this into narratives of early civilization. Doing so would mean acknowledging that significant chapters of human development may lie underwater, inaccessible and unaccounted for. Dwarka does not prove the epics literally true. It proves something more unsettling, that myth can function as memory across millennia, preserving the outline of events long after their physical evidence has sunk beyond easy reach. The unresolved question is no longer whether the sea can erase cities. It is how many civilizations it has already taken, and how much of human history now lies silent beneath the waves. When viewed in isolation, each of these cases can be contained. A city explained as coincidence, a machine labeled an anomaly, a myth reduced to metaphor. History has learned to survive by compartmentalizing its discomfort. But placed side by side, a pattern emerges that is no longer accidental. Troy demonstrates that legend can preserve geopolitical truth with disturbing accuracy. The Trojan War shows that epic memory can outlast formal record. Derinkuyu reveals society's engineering survival far beyond what their supposed threats require. The Dead Sea Scrolls expose how knowledge is deliberately preserved and deliberately hidden when it becomes dangerous. Machu Picchu proves that civilizations have mastered environments we still struggle to control. The Antikythera Mechanism confirms that technological peaks can appear, vanish, and leave almost no trace. Dwarka reminds us that entire chapters of human history may lie beneath the sea, erased not by failure, but by nature itself. These are not isolated anomalies. They point in the same direction. Human progress does not move forward in a straight line. It rises, stabilizes, and collapses, sometimes repeatedly. Knowledge is gained, refined, then lost. Not always through catastrophe, but through neglect, suppression, and the quiet erosion of memory. What survives is not what was most advanced, but what was most easily preserved. This is the fracture in the modern worldview. We assume ourselves to be the peak, the most informed, the most capable. Yet the evidence suggests that humanity has crossed thresholds before, technological, architectural, and intellectual, only to retreat from them, willingly or not. The past was not as simple as we were taught, and the present may not be as unprecedented as we believe. The most unsettling implication is not that ancient civilizations were advanced. It is that they may have learned something we have forgotten, that certain forms of knowledge carry consequences, that progress without restraint leaves scars not only on landscapes, but on memory itself, and that history, rather than warning us directly, hides its lessons in myth, in stone, and beneath the ocean, waiting for a future capable of recognizing the pattern. The question that remains is no longer whether these civilizations existed or whether their achievements were real. It is whether we are repeating the same trajectory, advancing rapidly, convinced of our permanence, while standing on the edge of limits we do not yet see.